The air was thick with silence. The charred remains of destroyed vehicles scattered across the barren ground, smoke still rising from the twisted wreckage. It was a battlefield that had been abandoned for days, perhaps weeks. The Empire's scout team carefully moved through the wreckage, their boots crunching over the ash and dirt. There was something eerie about the scene. The air, heavy with the stench of burnt metal and the remnants of battle, felt almost too quiet. A group of elite soldiers, led by Lieutenant Kale, moved cautiously, their eyes scanning the surroundings. These men had seen war, real war, not the routine battles the Empire often wage. But this felt different. This was something new. The Empire had wiped out many civilizations, but this place, something didn't add up. "Keep your eyes open," Lieutenant Kale murmured into his comms device, his voice low and tense. "We don't know what we're walking into." His soldiers nodded, but even they couldn't shake off the unease that gnawed at them. As they moved forward, they found what they were looking for. An old command center, half destroyed and buried beneath piles of debris. The team slowly approached, weapons at the ready. Something was wrong. The ruins were untouched by the usual signs of a massive battle. No bodies, no blood, just wreckage. It was too clean, too deliberate. Kale ordered the team to search the area. As they dug through the debris, they found something unexpected. A small holographic projector embedded in the rubble. The moment it was powered on, the air crackled and a blue hologram flickered to life before them. It was a man, tall, with short-cropped dark hair and a calm, unyielding expression on his face. He wore an armored suit, sleek and intimidating, the kind the Empire had never seen before. The words that escaped from the hologram's lips were simple, but they carried a weight of finality. "If you invade, you face me." The message, brief as it was, left the scout team in stunned silence. The words echoed in Cal's mind, but he couldn't grasp what they meant. Who was this person? How did they know the Empire would come for this planet? And why was this message left for them? As if this soldier had known they would arrive. As the team gathered around the hologram, trying to make sense of the cryptic message, one of the soldiers pulled out a datapad and began to run a scan. They quickly discovered the truth. A name. Nova, the scanner confirmed. A human soldier. Enhanced. The Empire has no record of him. The silence grew heavier. Nova. The name sounded familiar, but there were no records of such a soldier in any of the Empire's archives. Whoever he wasn't just a regular soldier. He was something else entirely, something the Empire hadn't anticipated. Lieutenant Cal's hand hovered over his comms. "What do we know about this Nova?" he asked the intelligence team back at the Empire's command center. The response came quickly. "Nothing. It's as if he's a ghost. No files, no history, just this message. Be careful, Lieutenant. This may be a trap." Kale grimaced. "A trap or not, we can't afford to ignore it. This soldier, or whatever he is, could be the key to everything. I want a full-scale invasion on this planet. Bring in everything we've got." He turned to his team, his voice hardening. "Get ready. We're going in." But as Kale issued the orders, a strange, unsettling feeling washed over him. Something didn't feel right. And as the Empire's massive fleet made its way toward the planet, the sense of unease only grew stronger. Back on the planet, in the underground bunkers, the human civilians watched in terror as the skies above darkened with the arrival of the Empire's fleet. The sound of massive ships descending was deafening, shaking the very ground they stood on. The few survivors of the initial invasion had sought shelter underground, but the fear of what was coming was all-consuming. They knew what the Empire was capable of. They knew the horrors they would soon face. But as the screams of fear filled the bunker, one voice cut through the chaos, clear, calm, and filled with authority. It was a voice that had been absent from this world for far too long. "Stay underground. I'll handle this." The radio crackled with static, But the message was unmistakable. It was Nova's voice. The message was short, but its impact was instant. The civilians fell silent, not out of fear this time, but out of disbelief. Who was this man? How could one person stand against the entire might of the Empire? Lieutenant Kell's fleet was now in orbit, descending toward the planet with its terrifying weaponry and relentless power. But it was too late. Nova had already made his move. On the ground, the few who remained in the bunker had no idea what to expect. They didn't know who Nova was, or how he was going to save them, but there was something about his voice, his words, that made them believe. For the first time in a long while, they felt a glimmer of hope. Meanwhile, far from the chaos, Nova stood in the shadows of the ruined city. His enhanced senses were tuned to the incoming threat. His AI systems analyzed every bit of data, calculating his next move with precise accuracy. He didn't have time to waste. The Empire had underestimated him, and now they were about to learn just how costly that mistake would be. As Nova moved silently through the city, his cloaking device keeping him hidden from the Empire's scanners, he allowed himself a brief moment to reflect. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about making a statement. The Empire needed to know that there was one thing it couldn't control: the human spirit. The stage was set. The Empire's massive fleet loomed above, ready to unleash hell upon the planet. But Nova wasn't afraid. He had one mission: to protect the innocent, and to make sure the Empire understood that they had underestimated humanity's strength. And so, as the Empire's forces descended, Nova's cryptic warning echoed in the minds of all who heard it. If you invade, you face me. The countdown had begun. The war was about to start, and Nova was ready to take on the might of the Empire, alone. The sky above the planet was filled with the ominous shadow of the Empire's fleet, hundreds of colossal ships, each one capable of obliterating entire cities, had descended, their heavy cannons aimed at the surface. The people in the bunkers below trembled as the vibrations of the massive ships shook the earth. The Empire's forces were relentless, prepared to wipe out every last trace of resistance. But what they didn't know was that the planet had one guardian, a lone soldier, Nova. Hidden beneath the cloak of his advanced stealth technology, Nova moved like a ghost through the shattered remains of the city. The cloaking device, a marvel of human engineering, rendered him invisible to the Empire's advanced scanners. He was a shadow, slipping past detection with every step, watching as the enemy's massive war machines lumbered forward, unaware of the impending strike. With his AI assistant, codenamed Eagle, by his side, Nova was more than just a soldier. He was a force of nature, the living weapon. The AI's neural networks processed data in real time, predicting enemy movements with deadly accuracy. Every time Nova activated his weapons, Eagle's calculations ensured that his strikes were as precise as they were lethal. Together, they were an unstoppable duo. Through the crackling comms, Nova heard the sounds of chaos rising from the Empire's advancing forces. Their tanks rumbled along the cracked streets, their heavy treads echoing through the ruined buildings. Soldiers moved in groups, scanning the horizon for any sign of resistance. But they would find nothing. Nova had already anticipated their every move. With a flick of his wrist, Nova's cloaking device deactivated, revealing him for only a moment. He was in position. As his HUD displayed the optimal target, he readied his weapons. His AI assistant projected the exact trajectory for his first strike. He could feel the anticipation building in his chest. He'd waited for this moment, trained for it, and now it was time to act. The first tank appeared in his sights, a heavily armored behemoth with thick plating that would withstand anything short of a direct assault from a heavy bombardment. But that didn't matter to Nova. With his enhanced strength and precision, he aimed for its weak spots. His first strike was a simple EMP blast, fired from his wrist-mounted weapon. The blast shot through the air like a bolt of lightning, slamming into the tank's systems. The tank's engines sputtered and died. Its weapons went silent. Within seconds, the entire vehicle was disabled, a hulking wreck. The Empire's forces had no idea what had happened. One moment, they were marching forward, confident of their superiority. And the next, one of their key machines had simply ceased to exist. Nova wasn't done. Before the enemy could react, Nova sprinted into the shadows, his feet barely touching the ground as he moved. The soldiers around the disabled tank scrambled, confused, their weapons raised in every direction, searching for an enemy they couldn't see. They were vulnerable, exposed. In a split second, Nova emerged from the darkness. He fired his pulse rifle at the soldiers nearest him. The first shot hit its mark, knocking a soldier off his feet. Before the others could process what had happened, Nova was already on the move again. His next target, a small platoon advancing toward the city's central area. Nova had anticipated their route, knowing they'd take the narrow alleyways. It was the perfect opportunity for a devastating strike. He activated his cloaking device once more, blending into the environment, and moved into position. The platoon moved in formation, unaware of the death lurking nearby. Nova's AI projected their movements with surgical precision, calculating the optimal moment for him to strike. As the platoon reached the perfect intersection, Nova unleashed a barrage of high-powered grenades, tossing them into their midst. The explosion was deafening. Soldiers were sent flying through the air, their bodies ripped apart by the sheer force of the blast. The alleyway was filled with smoke and fire, the remnants of the explosion engulfing everything in its wake. The Empire's platoon never had a chance. Nova didn't pause to watch the destruction. He was already moving. With his enhanced strength, he scaled the nearest building in seconds, positioning himself for another strike. From his vantage point high above the streets, Nova surveyed the battlefield. The Empire's forces had been thrown into chaos. Their machines were malfunctioning, their soldiers disoriented and panicked. They were no longer the organized, overwhelming force they had been moments before. But Nova wasn't finished. His next target was a squadron of armored drones, flying death machines armed with pulse cannons capable of wiping out entire buildings. These drones were a significant threat to the survivors hiding in the bunkers below. Nova knew he had to act quickly before they could locate the civilians. He launched himself off the rooftop, plummeting toward the ground with gravity-defying speed. His landing was a controlled strike, and before the drones could react, Nova fired his wrist cannons. A series of rapid shots disabled the first two drones mid-air, their weapons malfunctioning and crashing into the ground in a fiery explosion. As the remaining drones tried to regroup, Nova moved with lightning speed. Each shot he fired was precise, cutting down the enemy with ruthless efficiency. He was a machine, a human weapon, and he had only one goal: to protect the innocent. As the last of the drones fell, the battlefield fell silent. The Empire's forces were in disarray, their technology malfunctioning, their soldiers scattered and confused. They were no longer the unstoppable force they had been moments ago. They were now easy prey for Nova, who had turned the tables on them with nothing but his skill and the help of his AI assistant. But Nova knew this was just the beginning. The Empire would send reinforcements. They would adapt. They would learn. And the battle would continue. Still, for the moment, Nova had made his mark. The first strike had been a success, but the real war was only beginning. As he vanished into the shadows once again, the suspense hung in the air. What would Nova do next? Could he continue to outsmart the Empire? Or would the overwhelming force of the Empire crush him before he could complete his mission? The answers were still to come, but one thing was certain. The Empire had underestimated humanity once again, and Nova was more than ready for the challenge. The Empire's forces had underestimated Nova. At first, they believed that a single human soldier, no matter how skilled, wouldn't stand a chance against their overwhelming military might. But Nova had proved them wrong. The Empire's initial assault had been devastating, but Nova's precision strikes and his ability to move undetected had turned the tide. They were now reeling from the damage. But as with all empires, their pride was immense, and their response was swift. In the war room aboard the Empire's flagship, the generals were in a heated discussion. Their initial failure to crush Nova had angered the higher-ups, and now they were sending reinforcements. These weren't just any reinforcements. The Empire was bringing out their most advanced forces, an army designed to wipe out even the most skilled resistance. Nova's stealth and speed had caught them off guard, but now they would send robotic war machines capable of tracking even the most advanced cloaking devices. Along with them would be genetically enhanced soldiers, humans who had been modified to have superhuman strength, speed, and endurance. They were bred for war, designed to be the perfect killing machines. Nova's victory had been short-lived. The new forces the Empire deployed were unstoppable. Their firepower was immense, and the soldiers had been trained to withstand any type of assault. The outcome of the battle now seemed uncertain. Back in the colony's bunker, the civilians were trying to find hope. The sounds of explosions and gunfire echoed above them as the battle raged on. The walls of the bunker trembled with each impact, and the air inside was thick with tension. The people huddled together in small groups, trying to comfort one another as best as they could. There was an old woman sitting in the corner, her eyes closed, lost in thought. She had seen many battles in her life, but never had she felt so helpless. A young girl approached her and sat down beside her. The woman looked up and smiled softly. "What's your name, child?" the woman asked. "Amy," the girl replied. "I'm scared." The woman nodded, her expression filled with empathy. "We all are. But you know, we've fought battles before. We've survived, and we'll survive again. Don't forget that." Amy looked at her with wide eyes, the fear still evident in her expression. "How do you know?" The woman's smile grew a little stronger. "Because, child, we have something they don't. Hope. And we have Nova." Amy nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. She didn't fully understand, but she knew that there was something about Nova, something that made him more than just a soldier. He was their hope, their protector. And as long as he was out there, they had a chance. Meanwhile, Nova was preparing for his next mission. His last strike had been successful, but the battle was far from over. The Empire had learned from their previous mistakes. Now, they were sending an even stronger force to crush him. He needed to act fast. The Empire had one key advantage, an orbital command ship, high above the planet, controlling the movements of all their forces. If Nova could disable the ship, it would send the Empire's operations into disarray. The problem was, the ship was heavily guarded and nearly impossible to infiltrate. But Nova had never backed down from a challenge. With the help of his AI assistant, Eagle, Nova had identified a weak spot in the ship's defenses. It wasn't much, but it was enough. A single, vulnerable power core deep within the ship, hidden behind layers of security. If he could disable that core, it would cripple the ship and give the resistance a fighting chance. The mission was dangerous, impossible, even, but Nova was used to impossible odds. Using his enhanced agility, he began his ascent up a vertical cliffside toward a hidden entrance. The Empire's forces had set up a series of automated defense turrets, but Nova's AI had already mapped out their patterns. He was able to avoid detection with ease, slipping past the turrets as if he were a shadow. The further he went, the more dangerous it became. The ship was designed to withstand even the most determined intruders, and it was full of security personnel. But Nova wasn't deterred. With each obstacle, he adapted, using his agility and his training to find new ways around the defenses. At one point, he had to scale a sheer wall, his hands gripping the smooth surface as he ascended with lightning speed. His muscles burned with exertion, but he didn't stop. The Empire was closing in on the colony below, and he couldn't afford to fail now. When he finally reached the entrance, he paused to catch his breath. The AI flashed a warning on his HUD. Enemy reinforcements were arriving. He had little time left. Nova ducked into the shadows as a patrol of genetically enhanced soldiers passed by. They were faster, stronger, and more deadly than regular humans, but they were still vulnerable to Nova's superior tactics. As the soldiers moved past, he silently disabled their communication systems, ensuring they wouldn't be able to call for backup. Inside the ship, Nova was running out of time. The power core was close, but the closer he got, the more resistance he encountered. He fought off security drones, taking them out with precision strikes, his mind working in overdrive as he calculated every move. With each passing second, the tension built. Nova's heart raced, but he didn't let the pressure get to him. He knew this was it, the final push. If he could destroy the power core, the Empire's entire invasion force would be paralyzed. But if he failed, the consequences would be devastating. As he reached the heart of the ship, he could feel the gravity of the moment. The power core loomed ahead, surrounded by a heavy wall of security. Nova's AI flashed a warning. The core was protected by a force field, one that could only be disabled from the central control room. Nova took a deep breath, knowing he had no choice but to move fast. With a combination of speed and precision, he rushed into the control room, disabling the force field just as the Empire's reinforcements arrived. A final strike from his wrist-mounted EMP took down the core, sending a shockwave through the ship. Sparks flew, alarms blared, and the entire command center went dark. The Empire's orbital ship was now crippled. Nova knew this wasn't the end, but it was a victory that would give the Resistance the chance they needed to fight back. He didn't hesitate. He sprinted out of the room, retracing his steps as the ship began to implode behind him. As he made his way back to the surface, Nova could feel the weight of what he had just done. The Empire would come for him again, and they would bring their full force. But Nova was ready. He had a plan, and he had something that the Empire couldn't take away: hope. The battle was far from over, but for now, Nova had struck a powerful blow. The Empire had learned the hard way. Never underestimate humanity's will to survive. Nova had barely caught his breath after his mission on the orbital ship when the Empire made their next move. It wasn't just another platoon or a battalion of genetically enhanced soldiers. They were sending their deadliest weapon, a being so lethal that even the Empire's own commanders feared him. This was the Empire's top-tier assassin, a being created in the dark, twisted laboratories of the Empire's secret weapons division. But there was something more terrifying about this particular assassin. He wasn't fully human, a hybrid of alien and human DNA. He was stronger, faster, and more cunning than anything Nova had faced before. His name was Fantax, and his mission was clear. Nova had to die. The assassin arrived on the battlefield with a chilling calm. His movements were silent, his presence barely detectable. He wore a sleek, dark exoskeleton that enhanced his already extraordinary physical abilities. His face, partially hidden beneath a high-tech mask, held no emotion, just the cold, unfeeling look of a hunter ready to strike. Nova stood on the outskirts of the colony, his senses on high alert. The battle with the Empire was escalating, and he knew the threat was growing. The AI assistant, Eagle, flashed a warning on Nova's HUD. Warning: target detected. Threat level: extreme. This is no ordinary soldier. Nova didn't need any more confirmation. He had learned to trust his instincts, and right now, his instincts were screaming that Fantax was no mere soldier. This was the Empire's deadliest weapon, and Nova had to face him alone. The two opponents finally came face to face in an abandoned sector of the colony. The silence between them was deafening, broken only by the occasional distant explosion from the ongoing battle. Nova didn't hesitate. He charged forward, using his speed and enhanced agility to try to close the distance. But Fantax was ready. With the fluidity of a predator, the assassin dodged Nova's first strike, his alien-enhanced reflexes allowing him to move with lightning speed. In one swift motion, Fantax drew his twin blades, each shimmering with a dangerous edge, and lunged at Nova. Nova narrowly avoided the blades, but Fantax was relentless. Each strike from the assassin came faster than the last, his alien strength backing up every blow. Nova could feel the pressure building. This wasn't just a fight. It was a battle for survival. But Nova wasn't just any soldier. He had learned to rely on his human ingenuity, his ability to adapt in the heat of battle. While Fantax's enhanced body gave him incredible strength, Nova had something different: his experience. He had faced overwhelming odds before and had always come out on top. The two combatants clashed again, blades meeting in a shower of sparks. Nova managed to land a few hits, but Fantax's alien agility allowed him to shrug off the blows and counter with devastating precision. Each time Nova thought he had the upper hand, the assassin slipped away, almost as if he were a shadow himself. Nova could feel himself tiring, his muscles burning from the effort. Fantax, on the other hand, seemed to grow stronger with each passing moment. His alien enhancements made him a terrifying opponent. Nova knew that if he didn't think of something soon, this fight would end in disaster. The battle raged on, each strike more vicious than the last. Nova's mind raced, trying to find an opening, a weakness in Fantax's defenses. Then, in a split second, it came to him. He couldn't beat Fantax by matching him blow for blow. He had to outsmart him. Nova feigned a misstep, letting Fantax believe he had the upper hand. As the assassin lunged forward, Nova used his enhanced agility to twist out of the way at the last moment. This forced Fantax to overshoot, and in that brief moment of vulnerability, Nova struck. His fist connected with the assassin's side, a blow designed to disrupt Fantax's balance. Fantax staggered, just for a moment. But that was all Nova needed. He quickly followed up with a series of rapid punches, aiming for the weak points in the assassin's exoskeleton. Fantax snarled in pain but quickly recovered, slashing out with his blades. But Nova was already one step ahead, his movements guided by the eye's strategic input. Using the environment to his advantage, Nova knocked Fantax off balance, sending him crashing into a nearby wall. Breathing heavily, Nova stood over the fallen assassin, his muscles aching from the fight. Fantax slowly got up, his alien features twisted in fury. This wasn't over yet. The assassin's will to fight had not been broken, and Nova knew that he would have to end this battle quickly. In that moment, Nova's AI assistant, Eagle, transmitted a new plan: a coordinated strike to disable Fantax's exoskeleton. If Nova could damage the suit's power core, it would severely weaken the assassin, allowing Nova to deliver the final blow. Without hesitation, Nova launched himself forward once again, this time aiming for Fantax's chest. With one precise punch, he shattered the power core of the assassin's exoskeleton. Fantax's body jerked violently as the power supply short-circuited, his movements slowing. Nova took advantage of the momentary weakness, striking one final blow to Fantax's head. The assassin collapsed, his body twitching slightly as his life force drained away. The fight was over. Nova had won, but the victory felt hollow. He knew that Fantax was only the beginning. The Empire would send more soldiers, more assassins, and the battle would continue. But Nova's victory, though hard-earned, was a symbol of hope. Meanwhile, back in the colony's bunker, the civilians had been watching in secret. Through hidden cameras and encrypted transmissions, they had witnessed Nova's battle with the Empire's deadliest weapon. For them, this fight was more than just a battle. It was a message. Nova had defeated an unstoppable force, and in doing so, he had shown them that humanity could stand against the Empire, no matter how powerful they were. As news of the victory spread through the colony, morale soared. The fear that had once gripped the people began to fade, replaced by a newfound sense of hope. They had seen Nova fight and win, and they knew now that they weren't alone in this struggle. Nova's battle had become more than just a fight for survival. It had become a symbol of resistance. The tension in the colony had reached its breaking point. The Empire's orbital bombardment was imminent. Every day that passed, the massive fleet of ships hovered just above the planet, ready to unleash devastation upon the colony below. The civilians, hidden deep in the bunkers, were in a constant state of fear, waiting for the inevitable. But for Nova, Fear was not an option. He had made it this far, and now it was time to end it once and for all. The AI assistant, Eagle, flashed the final plan across Nova's HUD. The Empire's flagship, a massive warship that was controlling the orbital bombardment, was the key to stopping it. If Nova could disable or destroy this flagship, the entire Empire fleet would lose its precision targeting system, halting the bombardment and saving the colony. It was a suicide mission, one that Nova knew could be his last. He didn't hesitate. This was the moment that would determine the fate of the colony and humanity itself. Nova stood in the dark, cold corner of the bunker, his hand gripping the control panel as he looked out across the planet's surface. He knew that time was running out. The longer he waited, the more civilians would die. A group of brave volunteers, civilians who had managed to escape their bunkers, approached Nova. They were determined to help him with the mission, but Nova could see the fear in their eyes. These weren't soldiers. They were just ordinary people, desperate to fight back. "You can't go alone," one of them said, his voice trembling with resolve. "We'll fight with you." Nova shook his head. "No. If I fail, humanity still needs hope. You all have families to protect. You need to stay here to keep the hope alive for everyone else." It was the hardest decision Nova had ever made, but he knew that he was the only one who could do it. His enhanced abilities, his AI-assisted strategies, and his sheer determination were the only things that stood between the Empire's victory and humanity's survival. The civilians reluctantly agreed, knowing deep down that Nova was right. They returned to the safety of the bunker, while Nova prepared for his final mission. The world around him seemed to hold its breath. The air was thick with anticipation as Nova suited up for the most dangerous mission of his life. His armor was reinforced, and his cloaking device was fully charged. Every piece of advanced technology he had at his disposal was ready for action. He knew that this mission would take everything he had, but there was no turning back. As he climbed into the cockpit of his customized fighter ship, Nova's thoughts drifted for a moment. He thought about the colony, the people he was fighting for, the families, the children, the brave souls who had shown their courage by standing up against the Empire. They were depending on him, and he wouldn't let them down. The ship's engines roared to life as Nova launched into the sky. The massive flagship loomed in the distance, its enormous guns trained on the colony below. Nova engaged the cloaking device, slipping past the Empire's outer defenses undetected. His ship moved like a shadow through the night sky, the stars streaking by as Nova maneuvered toward his target. The Empire had no idea he was coming. They were too focused on their bombardment strategy, thinking that victory was inevitable. They were wrong. But even with all his technology, Nova knew that the hardest part was yet to come. He was going to have to get past the flagship's formidable defenses, including its fleet of fighter drones, automated turrets, and shield generators. It was going to be an uphill battle, but Nova was determined to succeed. The first wave of enemy fighters appeared on his radar. They were fast, highly maneuverable, and well-armed. But Nova had something they didn't: strategy. His AI assistant, Eagle, quickly scanned the fighters and provided him with real-time tactics. "Target the engines," Nova, Eagle instructed, the AI's voice calm yet urgent. "Take out their propulsion systems. Without power, they'll be nothing but sitting ducks." Nova locked onto the nearest enemy fighter, his heart pounding as he fired. The shot landed perfectly, and the fighter exploded in a fiery ball of debris. One down. But there were more coming, and they were getting closer. Nova knew that he couldn't afford to waste any time. He boosted his ship's speed, weaving through the enemy forces with incredible agility. Each shot he fired was calculated, precise, as he systematically took out the remaining fighters. The flagship was now in his sights. He could see its massive guns, its heavily armored hull, and the shield generators glowing with energy. This was it, the final showdown. Nova engaged his ship's afterburners, closing the distance between him and the flagship at a blistering speed. The Empire's defenses opened fire, lasers, and missiles streaking past him. His ship rocked with the impact of a few near misses, but Nova remained focused. His mind, enhanced by the AI, was operating at peak efficiency. As he approached the flagship, Nova triggered his cloaking device again, disappearing from the enemy's radar. He weaved through the chaotic space battle, his target clear, the flagship's weak point, the central reactor core. Nova executed a daring maneuver, dodging a barrage of fire as he flew straight toward the flagship. His ship shook violently as explosions erupted around him, but he pressed on. He had one shot. At the last possible moment, Nova released a salvo of missiles aimed directly at the flagship's reactor. The missiles hit their mark, and for a moment, everything seemed to freeze. Then, the flagship erupted in a blinding flash of light. The shockwave rippled through space, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. The Empire's orbital bombardment ceased immediately, as the flagship's destruction sent the entire fleet into disarray. Nova's ship was caught in the blast radius, spinning uncontrollably. His ship's systems screamed in protest as alarms blared. But Nova held onto the controls, refusing to let go. The last thing he saw before his vision faded was the colony below, safe for now, free from the Empire's wrath. The final battle had ended. The Empire's once mighty fleet, shattered and broken, retreated into the depths of space, unable to continue its conquest. The few remaining ships turned tail, fleeing from the planet they had once fought to crush. The victory was bittersweet, but it was undeniable. The colony had been saved. The Empire's threat was over. The silence that followed the battle was deafening. For the people who had hidden in bunkers for so long, unsure if they would ever see another sunrise, it felt almost too good to be true. They emerged from their underground shelters, blinking in the bright sunlight as they stepped back into the world they had once known. The air was clear, the skies were open, and for the first time in a long time, the threat of destruction had passed. They were free. But amidst the joy of survival, there was an undeniable sense of loss. They knew that their savior, the one who had given everything to ensure their survival, was gone. Nova, the hero who had stood alone against the might of the Empire, had sacrificed himself to destroy the flagship and end the invasion. His death was a symbol of the cost of freedom, a reminder that even the greatest heroes could fall. As the people of the colony began to rebuild, they kept Nova's memory alive. His story was told over and over again, passed down from generation to generation. Children who had once been terrified of the Empire's invasion now grew up hearing tales of bravery and sacrifice. Nova was no longer just a soldier. He had become a legend, a symbol of resistance, courage, and the indomitable human spirit. In every corner of the colony, people erected statues and monuments in his honor. His name was spoken with reverence, his deeds immortalized in the hearts of all who had witnessed his heroism. He had been the beacon of hope in their darkest hours, and his sacrifice had ensured that the future would be theirs to shape. But perhaps the most profound tribute came from the children. They had watched from the safety of their bunkers, unaware of the dangers surrounding them, as Nova took on the Empire's greatest forces. His courage inspired them, filled them with a sense of purpose and duty. They knew that, like Nova, they would one day be called upon to defend their home, to fight for the survival of humanity. One young boy, no older than 12, stood before the newly unveiled statue of Nova. His small hands were clenched into fists, his eyes filled with determination. He had heard the stories of Nova's bravery, of how the soldier had fought not just for his survival, but for the survival of everyone he loved. The boy had grown up in the shadows of war, surrounded by tales of heroes, but Nova's story was different. Nova was more than just a hero. He was the embodiment of everything humanity could achieve when they refused to give up. The boy's eyes lingered on the statue, and for a moment, he imagined himself standing in Nova's place. He imagined the power, the strength, the courage. He imagined defending his people, just as Nova had done. "Mom," he said, his voice trembling with emotion, I'm going to become a soldier. I'm going to train to be like him." His mother, standing nearby, looked down at her son with a mixture of pride and sadness. She knew that her child was choosing a difficult path, one that would take him away from her. But she also knew that the galaxy needed people like him, people like Nova. "You're already a hero in my eyes," she said softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "But remember, it's not just about fighting. It's about protecting those you love. It's about standing up when the world seems impossible to fight." The boy nodded, determined. He knew that the journey ahead of him wouldn't be easy. The Empire was gone for now, but the galaxy was vast, and threats would always exist. He would have to train to become strong. But more than that, he would have to carry the legacy of Nova with him. As the years passed, the boy grew into a young man, just as determined as he had been as a child. He joined the military, rising through the ranks with the same fire that Nova had once shown. The stories of Nova's bravery never faded, and the young soldiers who trained alongside him knew the importance of what they were doing. They were fighting not just for survival, but for a future that had been made possible by a single hero's sacrifice. Years after the invasion, when the boy had become a man and the galaxy had once again found peace, he stood in front of Nova's statue once more. This time, he wasn't alone. A group of young recruits stood beside him, their faces filled with the same determination he had once felt as a child. They had all heard the stories of Nova, and they knew that they were standing in the presence of a true hero. The man who had once been a boy now stepped forward, his chest swelling with pride. He saluted Nova's statue, his voice firm as he spoke to the new generation of soldiers. "Nova was more than a soldier," he said, his voice echoing across the square. "He was a symbol of everything we stand for. He showed us that even when the odds are stacked against us, we can rise above. We fight for our people. We fight for our future. And we fight for the hope that Nova gave us all." The recruits nodded, inspired by the legacy that had been passed down to them. They understood the weight of the responsibility that Nova had left behind. They understood that they weren't just fighting for themselves, but for everyone who had ever lived and died in the name of freedom. As the sun set over the colony, the man stood there, watching as the stars began to appear in the sky. He knew that Nova's legacy would never fade. It would live on in every soldier who took up the fight, in every citizen who stood against tyranny, in every heart that refused to surrender. And somewhere, in the quiet of space, Nova's spirit lingered, watching over them all.